Hey everybody, we're here with the Master Distiller Emeritus of Woodford Reserve, Chris Morris. Did I get your title right?
You did.
Okay. Well, welcome, Chris. And today I want to talk about Woodford Reserve. This brand, obviously, people I think understand the DNA of this brand was in Old Forester, which I always tell people that's kind of like the city bourbon of Louisville. But this brand evolved as a sort of premium to that. And maybe just talk a little bit about what you're looking for in every bottle of Woodford Reserve. What's that kind of core flavor profile that people seek out?
Yes, now that's a very interesting way of framing it. So yes, when we created Woodford Reserve, beginning our work in the late 1980s, early 1990s, of course we had one bourbon, that was Old Forester, the founding brand of the company. And we like Old Forester. The Brown family loves Old Forester.
Yeah.
So what better place to start than some place you're familiar with? Mm-hmm. But again, Old Forester has its distinct flavor profile. Your customers will recognize, I call it a classic 19th century bourbon. It has a lot of oak, it has a lot of rye, it has a lot of spice character. Yes, there's going to be little bits of fruit and sweet, but it's going to have that classic old flavor. And of course, at that time, bourbon was falling out of fashion. Mm-hmm. So you don't want to make a new bourbon taste like an old bourbon that tastes like something people don't want anymore. And thank goodness they've gone back to wanting that kind of flavor profile. But we also had a global ambition to sell this new bourbon around the world. And around the world, obviously, as you know, there's so many different spirits, beers, and wines that other cultures are drinking. The cachaças and the rums of South America, the grappas, the red wines of Italy, the malt whiskeys of Northern Europe, the beer, etc. So the world has a diverse palate. And if you're going to launch a new brand, specifically a bourbon brand, globally, it has to have the flavors of the world. It has to be attractive to more than just bourbon palates, because there might not be a bourbon palate in Brazil, for example, which was true.
Right.
So how do we do that? So we start with the same grain recipe that Old Forester has, 72% corn, 18% rye, 10% malted barley, nice malt character, certainly rye for spice, corn for sweetness, but how do we evolve that? So we created a new yeast strain, the Woodford Reserve yeast strain, and that's one thing about Brown-Forman's whiskeys that is quite different from other great distilling companies, is each of our brands and distilleries has its own live yeast, proprietary yeast. So we developed a new yeast that would ferment for twice as long as the Old Forester yeast. Long fermentation is very expensive, but it's going to create complex flavor.
Is that more like malt nuttiness with a longer ferment, or is it more fruity esters with
more fruity esters?
Okay.
Specifically. So let's get a lot of fruit. Again, if you want to attract wine drinkers and craft beer drinkers, etc., wine esters are really going to be a key. But then, how do you make sure you get those out of the distillation process, out of the mash, out of the beer, when the industry had completely converted after Prohibition from pot still to column still? Mm-hmm. And we make Old Forester in column still. So I'm not knocking column stills, but we knew we had to bring pot stills back to America. We had to make our whiskey like the cognacs of France, like the malt whiskeys of Scotland, and the great whiskeys of Ireland. We needed pot stills. And not only did we get pot stills from Scotland, we brought triple distillation to America, like the Irish style. So we're the first and only distillery in the history of the United States to triple distill whiskey. So we can get those esters and those spice notes and all the great complexity out of our mash into spirit, and then of course into barrel. And again, Old Forester is column still, so it's crisper. Now we got more body, we got more weight, more complexity in the Woodford distillate, but it goes into barrel. And Old Forester has your traditional 125 proof entry. We decided a lower proof entry was going to be important, so we enter at 110 proof, because if you don't know, sugar dissolves in water. It doesn't dissolve in alcohol. So many of the flavor components in that barrel we want are the wood sugars. So having more water content is going to draw more out. Why doesn't everybody do that? we're adding 14% more water, which means we need 14% more barrels, warehouse space, tremendous cost. But again, we were chasing flavor. If you want those wonderful sweet aromatic notes for those rum drinkers, for example, you got to have those. So we put together the same 5 sources of flavor we used to make Old Forester, or our great colleagues in the industry use, but we made them very different at the same time. And that's how we evolved that flavor profile to this flavor profile. But it's interesting. I've been tasting barrels of Woodford Reserve since day one.
Mm-hmm.
I have tasted hundreds of thousands of barrels.
I'm sure.
I've never tasted one barrel that tastes like Woodford Reserve.
Mm-hmm.
Every barrel, as your single barrel customers know, are unique. And to get a product that is going to attract more palates, it has to be balanced. So we're batching together barrels from different production dates, barrels that are in different warehouses, different locations in warehouses. Some barrels have a stronger fruit character, some have more spice, wood, grain, or sweet aromatic profile. And by batching them in a considered way, we bring all 5 areas of flavor in balance.
Yeah.
So the customer, big red customer, when they get a bottle of Woodford, they're going to find exactly what they like in it because the flavors are in balance.
Yeah.
Not one sticks out over the other. So if you don't like spice, Woodford's not too spicy. If you like spice, Woodford's just spicy enough. So balance has been the key to our success.
Yeah. So I think, letting people understand that the difference between Old Forester and Woodford Reserve in terms of barrel entry, in terms of pot still distillation, in terms of the unique yeast strain, I don't know that those are always widely known brand attributes. And I think for people to know that, if somebody's an Old Forester drinker, if they tried Woodford a few years ago and they haven't gone back to it, to go back to it and understand how unique it is and how different it is from Old Forester, I think is a key part of
it really is. And I'm very happy to always sample them side by side to showcase. Each one has its own individual character. And there's reasons we have 90.4 proof versus the 86 and 100 proof Old Forester, because again, we choose the proof to best exhibit that flavor profile. So again, that's just another way of articulating that they're different.
Yeah. Well, so if you haven't tried Woodford Reserve in a while, we've got a great price on it right now, $29.99.
That's a good price.
Go check it out at Big Red, and appreciate you being here. Thank you.
Well, thank you for having us.
Thanks.